The twin suns shone brightly over the palace of Leora, casting golden light over the tall crystal towers. The palace looked like it was carved from one giant diamond. At the center stood the glass garden, a clear dome filled with glowing trees, singing flowers and silver streams that sparkled like stars. Inside that dome lived Princess Neril, the only heir to the Leoran Empire. She was beautiful in a way that felt otherworldly. Her skin had a soft silver glow. Her eyes were deep blue and her hair moved gently like waves in water. But no one could go near her. Neril carried a natural poison in her skin. It was part of her species, a defense that once kept her people safe from enemies. Over time it became a curse for her. Anyone who touched her without special suits would not survive. Because of this, she grew up without hugs, handshakes, or gentle pats on the shoulder. She lived in silence inside the glass garden, surrounded by beauty but separated from every living being. Every day Neril walked along the clear pathways of the garden. The flowers responded to her steps by opening their petals. The small floating creatures followed her like loyal pets. From the outside, many thought she was lucky. She had everything a princess could want: servants, rare foods, knowledge from across galaxies, and beautiful surroundings. But in truth, she felt empty. The dome that looked like a jewel from afar was a cage from within. Far away on Earth, news of the Leoran Empire had reached human leaders. After many years of tension between the two civilizations, both sides decided to hold peace talks. A group of human envoys traveled across the stars to the Leoran homeworld. Among them was Markel, a young man who had grown up on starships. He was not a famous diplomat, but he had a skill for connecting with others. He listened more than he spoke, and he had a warm and fearless nature. When the human ship arrived at Leora, the alien city stunned the envoys. Towering structures floated in the air, bridges curved through clouds, and vehicles moved silently without any engines. Everything was graceful, calm, and full of light. The humans were guided into the palace where the peace ceremony would take place. As they passed through the corridors, Markel noticed something others missed. He saw a faint figure walking inside a glass dome at the center of the palace gardens. She moved slowly and gracefully. He asked a guard about her, and the guard answered in a respectful but cold tone. "She is the princess. No one touches her. No one goes inside. She is sacred and dangerous." Markel felt curious. He had seen many leaders, but never someone so alone. Her movements were delicate, as if she was dancing with the air. She was surrounded by life, yet completely isolated. Something in that moment stayed in his mind. Later that evening, during the formal gathering, the alien emperor spoke of their goals for peace. The humans replied with promises of cooperation. While the leaders exchanged words, Markel wandered to the edge of the garden dome. The guards allowed him to stand outside as long as he stayed behind the security line. Inside, Neril noticed him. Most visitors kept their distance or looked away quickly, but this human did not. He simply stood there, hands behind his back, looking at the glowing trees with genuine interest. For Neril, this was unusual. Most people who visited stared at her like she was a rare creature, or avoided looking at her at all. This human seemed neither afraid nor fascinated. He looked calm and curious. She approached the inner glass wall slowly. He saw her clearly for the first time. Her silver skin reflected the lights of the garden. Her eyes were not cold like he expected, but filled with quiet sadness. Markel raised his hand in greeting, pressing it lightly against the glass. Neril hesitated, then lifted her own hand and placed it against the same spot on the other side. The transparent wall separated them, but for a brief second it felt like they shared the same space. An attendant rushed over and warned Markel not to disturb the princess. He apologized politely and stepped back, but the moment had already made a small mark on both of their hearts. That night, Neril sat by a glowing tree, thinking about the human. She had seen many visitors before, but none had looked at her like that. His eyes did not carry fear or judgment. They carried warmth. She wondered what it would be like to speak to him. The next morning, Markel joined a small team assigned to cultural exchange tasks. This meant he would spend time near different areas of the palace to observe and learn. He volunteered eagerly for the glass garden duty, which surprised his team leader. Most avoided that area because they found it uncomfortable to stand near someone who could not be approached. Inside the dome, Neril continued her daily walk. Outside, Markel studied the plants and asked questions about their unique light patterns. One of the Leoran scientists explained that the princess's presence gave energy to the plants, keeping the ecosystem alive. As the hours passed, Markel noticed how the princess glanced at him occasionally. He decided to make a small gesture. He took out a small earth flower that he kept in a preservation case. It was a simple white flower from his home garden. Carefully, he placed it on a small platform at the base of the dome, where offerings were sometimes left. Nirel saw the flower. She approached the glass and looked at it closely. She had never seen such a fragile and simple thing. Everything in her garden was bright, strong, and alien. This little flower carried a different kind of beauty. She knelt near the glass and whispered something in her own language. Her voice was soft like a breeze through leaves. Markel could not understand the words, but he smiled. He touched his chest gently with his hand and then pointed to the flower, trying to say that it was from his heart. Nirel understood the gesture and nodded slightly. That evening, as stars filled the alien sky, Nirel sat alone again under her glowing tree. Yet something had changed inside her. For the first time in a long while, her world did not feel entirely empty. She thought of the human with the quiet eyes and the gentle smile. She thought of the little white flower resting against the clear wall. Markel, lying in his temporary quarters, also could not stop thinking about the princess. He had seen many wonders in his travels, but her silent loneliness touched him more deeply than any sight. He wondered what her life was like inside that glass cage. He wondered if he could ever speak to her, not as a princess and a visitor, but as two living beings who understood each other. The next day began with clear skies over the palace. The twin suns rose slowly, painting the glass towers with shades of gold and pink. The air was calm, and the floating bridges shone with soft light. It was the perfect day for peace talks, and both humans and Leorans gathered in the main hall. Speeches were given, agreements were discussed, and translators worked carefully to make sure no words were misunderstood. Markel sat quietly in the cultural exchange section, listening to the leaders. His thoughts, however, kept drifting back to the glass garden. He could not forget the moment when the princess placed her hand against the glass near his. It had felt like a silent conversation. He wanted to understand her more. During the lunch break, Markel saw a list of duties for the day. One group would assist the science team near the glass garden to study the unique ecosystem. He quickly offered to join. His team leader raised an eyebrow, surprised at his eagerness, but allowed it. When he reached the garden area, the guards checked his identification. Once they allowed him through, he stood outside the clear dome again. Inside, Princess Nirel was sitting near a pool of shining water. She was feeding small glowing creatures that floated like gentle lights in the air. Her movements were soft and graceful. She looked peaceful, but her eyes still held a quiet sadness. Markel spoke softly to one of the alien attendants near him. He asked if there was a way to speak with the princess. The attendant explained that a special translator system existed at the edge of the dome. Visitors could talk through a speaker that carried voices inside without opening the structure. It was rarely used, but it was allowed if approved by the royal staff. Markel asked for permission, explaining that he wanted to learn more about the garden for cultural understanding. The royal staff hesitated but finally allowed it since it fit the purpose of the exchange. When the translator was activated, Nirel turned her head slightly curious. A soft chime signaled that someone wanted to speak. Markel spoke slowly and clearly. "Hello, Princess Nirel, I am Markel. I'm honored to see your garden." His voice echoed gently inside the dome. Nirel tilted her head and stepped closer to the glass wall. She replied in her own language, and the translator repeated her words in basic human speech. "Welcome, Markel. This is my home. Few asked to speak with me." Markel smiled, even though she could not feel it through the glass. "Your home is beautiful. I have never seen anything like it. The flowers sing when you walk. The air looks alive." Nirel gave a small nod. "They live because of me. My body keeps this place healthy. The plants grow strong from my energy. The creatures stay near me because I feed them with light." Markel listened carefully. He could hear a soft sadness behind her calm tone. "It must be a special gift," he said. "It is a gift in a chain," Nirel replied through the translator. "I keep this place alive, but I cannot leave. If I step outside for too long, the garden fades. If someone touches me, they fall. No one has ever held my hand." Her words hung in the air like a quiet echo. Markel's chest tightened slightly. He had grown up surrounded by people, hugs, and teamwork on starships. The thought of living without touch felt cold and lonely. As days passed, Markel returned to the garden again and again. Sometimes he asked questions about the plants. Sometimes he told small stories about Earth. He described blue skies, oceans with endless waves, and forests full of animals that made strange sounds. Nero listened with interest. She asked many questions about birds and rain. She had never felt rain. The dome always kept her safe and dry. Slowly, their conversations grew longer. Nero started smiling more. Her voice became warmer when she spoke through the translator. Markel noticed how her eyes lit up when he described human celebrations and music. One evening, after most workers left, Markel stayed behind near the garden to finish some notes. Nero approached the glass from inside. The sun was setting and soft light filled the dome. She spoke first this time. "Markel, why do you keep coming here? Others come once or twice. You come every day." Markel thought for a moment before replying. "I like talking to you. You understand things others don't. You see the world in a quiet way. It feels good to speak with you." Nero lowered her eyes for a moment, then looked back at him. "People are afraid of me," she said. "They look at me as if I am a danger. You do not." "I see you as a person," Markel answered. "Not a danger." Nero placed her hand against the glass wall. Without hesitation, Markel placed his hand on the same spot from the outside. The glass separated them, but their hands lined up perfectly. Neither spoke for a long moment. The world around them grew quiet. From the distance, two guards noticed their silent exchange but did not interrupt. They had seen the princess stand alone for years. For the first time, they saw her truly engaged with someone. A few days later, the alien court announced that a grand ceremony would take place soon to sign the first stage of the peace treaty. Visitors from both civilizations would attend. There were whispers that some factions inside the empire were not happy with the peace. Some wanted to keep their isolation. Others believed humans were too reckless. Markel heard these whispers too, but he stayed focused on his daily visits. The translator sessions became a part of both their routines. He would arrive, greet her, share stories, and listen to her talk about the life inside the dome. She even taught him a few simple words in her language. One afternoon as they spoke, Nero said something unexpected. "Markel, if you ever touch me, you will fall. My skin carries a poison that no one survives. I do not want that to happen to you. You should keep your distance." Markel looked at her through the glass. He understood the warning, but there was no fear in his eyes. "I know," he said softly, "but I will not run away because of it." Nero stared at him quietly. She had told this to others before, and they always stepped back or avoided her completely after that. But this human stood firm. His calmness unsettled her in a strange way. She felt both worried and curious. That night, Nero lay on the soft glowing grass of her garden, looking up at the dome ceiling where artificial stars shone. She thought about Markel's words. No one had ever spoken to her like that. For the first time in her life, she felt something different inside her heart, something warm and unfamiliar. The day of the peace ceremony arrived with great excitement across the palace. Banners of both civilizations were displayed on the floating bridges. Musicians from both sides prepared their instruments. The crystal halls were polished until they shone like stars. The palace was full of guests, soldiers, and officials moving in perfect order. Markel woke early, dressed in his formal uniform, and joined his group near the main hall. The human delegation was ready to witness the signing of the first stage of peace between Earth and the Lioran Empire. It was a historic moment, and everyone felt its weight. While the leaders gathered in the great hall, Markel looked toward the glass garden from the balcony. He knew Nero would not attend the ceremony. She was considered too dangerous to be near large groups. She would watch everything through the palace's inner network from her dome. He wished he could speak with her one more time before the event began. Inside the dome, Nero stood near the central glowing tree. She wore a long silver gown that shimmered under the garden light. She watched the preparations on a transparent screen. She felt proud of her father's leadership, but also distant from everything. The walls of glass separated her from the celebrations just as they had separated her from the world all her life. As the ceremony began, speeches echoed through the hall. The human ambassador spoke about shared hopes and future cooperation. The alien emperor spoke about trust and understanding. Applause filled the air as the treaty scroll was presented. Everyone expected a smooth event, But not everyone wanted peace. High above the hall, hidden behind the decorative panels, a group of extremist saboteurs worked silently. They believed humans would bring danger to their empire. They wanted to disrupt the ceremony and send a message. Their plan was to cause a controlled explosion near the garden area, damaging part of the dome and creating panic without hurting the emperor directly. They placed small energy charges along the support structure of the glass garden dome. They planned to activate them when the signing ceremony reached its highest point. Markel, standing with his group, felt a faint vibration under his feet. It was brief but unusual. He looked around, but others were focused on the speeches. His instincts from years on starships told him something was wrong. He quietly stepped away from the group and moved toward the garden area. At that exact moment, the saboteurs activated the charges. A sharp tremor shook the palace. A bright flash lit the sky as part of the dome structure cracked. Alarms rang throughout the halls. Guards shouted orders and rushed to secure the area. Inside the dome, Nirel felt the ground shudder beneath her feet. She looked up to see a section of the dome splitting. Shards of glowing glass rained down. She moved back quickly as the alarm lights turned red. The protective barriers activated, but part of the structure was already collapsing. Toxic gas from the garden's defensive system began leaking through the cracks. The palace systems identified the gas and locked down the area to prevent it from spreading. That meant the garden was sealed off completely and no one could enter or exit without special clearance. Nirel was trapped inside. She moved toward the emergency exit, but debris blocked her path. She called for help through the palace network, but the response was slow because the guards were focused on protecting the main hall. Outside the garden, Markel ran through the corridors toward the dome. He saw smoke and broken glass. The guards warned him to stay back. "The air inside is dangerous," one guard shouted. "No one can enter without a full protection suit." "The princess is inside, but we are waiting for the special team." Markel looked through the cracked wall and saw Nirel at the far end of the dome. She was trying to push away fallen glass and move toward the exit. He saw fear in her eyes, not for herself, but for the possibility of the gas spreading beyond the garden. Without waiting for orders, Markel grabbed a light protective mask from a nearby emergency box and forced his way through the damaged entry point. The guards shouted for him to stop, but he did not listen. Inside the dome, the air shimmered with strange colors from the leaking gas. The plants gave off wild energy. Some glowing creatures flew in confused circles. Nirel saw him entering and shook her head strongly. "No," she shouted through the translator system. "Go back, it is dangerous for you." Markel coughed lightly but kept moving forward. He climbed over fallen crystal beams and reached her side. She looked both shocked and worried. "You should not be here," Nirel said. "If you stay near me for too long, the gas in my poison will harm you." "I am not leaving you here alone," Markel said firmly. Another loud crack echoed through the dome. A large section of the structure tilted dangerously. The central glowing tree swayed and its roots tore through the floor. The situation grew worse with each second. Nirel tried to push a heavy beam out of the way, but it would not move. Markel stepped beside her and used all his strength to lift one end. Together they cleared enough space to pass through. She guided him toward the emergency shield panel. The system required 2 manual levers to close off the damaged section. Nirel could handle one, but the other was located across the garden. Markel volunteered to run to the second lever. He climbed over debris, ignoring the growing sting in his lungs. He pulled the lever with all his strength, and the emergency barrier came down between them and the collapsing structure. The dome stopped falling for the moment, but they were still trapped inside with no clear way out. The control system was offline due to the explosion, and the rescue team outside needed time to cut through the layers safely. Nirel looked at Markel through the gas-filled air. She saw the faint strain on his face. He had come for her without hesitation. "You are not like the others," she whispered softly. Markel managed a small smile. "Someone has to make sure you are safe," he said. She stepped closer to him, careful not to touch. The world around them was shaking. Alarms echoed and glowing lights flickered. But in that moment it felt like time slowed. 2 beings from different worlds stood side by side inside a broken dome, facing danger together for the first time. Outside, the guards worked to open a safe path. Inside, Markel and Nirel prepared to hold their ground. The dome might fall, but neither intended to give up. The alarms continued to ring across the palace as teams rushed to control the damage. Outside the glass garden, engineers and soldiers worked to seal off leaking gas and reinforce the broken structure. Inside, Markel and Nerel stood together, surrounded by fallen crystal beams and glowing plants that now pulsed with unstable light. Markel's breathing grew heavier under the mask. It was only meant for short use, not for extended exposure to toxic air. The shimmering gas made the air feel thick and hot. Cracks spread slowly across the remaining parts of the dome ceiling. Every sound echoed sharply. Nerel moved to the main control platform and tried to restart the emergency system. The control panel sparked, showing signs of serious damage. She pressed the glowing keys again and again, but nothing responded. "It is not working," she said through the translator. "The system is broken. If the ceiling collapses, we will not escape in time." Markel scanned the area. There was only one clear section left near the center of the garden where the glowing tree stood. The roots were lifting from the ground, shaking the entire structure. He knew that if the dome fell, they would be buried under heavy crystal. Outside, the rescue team contacted the palace command center. They estimated they needed several more minutes to cut through safely. Markel knew they might not have that time. Nerel turned to him with firm eyes. "You should have stayed outside," she said. "You cannot survive long here. The air is poisonous, and I am poisonous too. If you come too close, it will harm you." Markel stepped forward slightly, ignoring her warning. "I was not going to watch you get trapped while I stayed safe," he answered. "I made my choice when I came inside." Nerel felt something stir inside her chest. All her life, people had stayed away from her. Even the palace workers wore thick suits and kept their distance. She had accepted loneliness as a part of her fate. Yet here stood a human who refused to step back. Another loud crack tore through the air. A section of the ceiling began to break away. Crystal beams fell toward the control platform. Nerel jumped aside as shards rained down. One sharp piece struck near her leg and she stumbled. Markel rushed to her and helped her up without touching her directly. She leaned against a damaged pillar, her breath unsteady. "I cannot leave this place," she whispered. "If I go, the garden will collapse completely. The gas will spread through the palace. It will harm others." Markel looked at the trembling structure and then at her. "You do not have to face this alone," he said. The noise grew louder as another support beam gave way. Dust and light filled the air. Nerel struggled to stay on her feet. Markel made a quick decision. He stepped closer, removed his damaged mask, and wrapped his arms around her. She gasped in shock. "No, stop," she cried. "You cannot touch me. My skin will hurt you." But Markel held her firmly. He pulled her close to shield her from the falling debris. His arms were strong and steady, and his heartbeat was clear against her ear. She felt his warmth through the thin layers of his uniform. For the first time in her life, someone held her without fear. Nerel expected him to collapse instantly from the poison in her skin, but something unexpected happened. His body reacted, but not in the way she feared. His breathing became heavy, but he remained conscious. His skin flushed for a moment, then steadied. The strange energy of his human immune system began to adapt to her toxin. It did not reject it completely, but it resisted enough to keep him standing. She stared at him with wide eyes. "You should not be alive," she whispered. "I told you," he said with a strained but steady voice. "I am not leaving you." The ground shook again. Markel tightened his hold and moved her toward the only stable corner of the dome. He positioned himself between her and the collapsing ceiling. Crystal fragments fell around them, but his body shielded her from the worst of it. Outside, the rescue team finally reached the dome's outer layer. They saw the two figures inside through the broken glass. Shouts filled the communication lines as they worked faster to cut through the remaining barriers. Inside, time felt slower. Nerel's head rested against Markel's chest. She heard the strong rhythm of his heart. It was a sound she had never experienced so closely before. Her people lived without touch, without physical closeness. This simple human heartbeat felt powerful and strange. "I have never been this close to anyone," she said softly. Markel looked down at her. His vision blurred slightly from the gas, but his determination stayed strong. "You are not alone anymore," he replied. Nerel felt tears gather in her eyes. They rolled down her glowing cheeks, mixing with the light of the garden. She had cried before in loneliness, but this time the tears came from a deep feeling she could not fully name. Moments later, a loud hiss filled the air as the rescue team broke through the dome wall with special equipment. Soldiers in protective suits rushed inside, creating a safe corridor. They were surprised to find Markel still alive, holding the princess in his arms. The team quickly wrapped Nirel in a containment field to stabilize the garden's environment. They placed a light breathing unit on Markel and carried both of them out of the damaged dome. Behind them, the glass garden shone brightly one last time before the emergency systems shut down completely. In the medical chamber, scientists from both sides gathered in shock. They examined Markel carefully. His skin showed mild signs of reaction, but nothing fatal. His body had adjusted to the princess's toxin in a way no one expected. The doctors could hardly believe their readings. Nirel sat nearby, watching him recover. Her thoughts spun in quiet circles. A human had done what no one else had ever tried. He had touched her. He had survived. He had held her as the world around them fell apart. Later, when Markel opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was Nirel sitting beside him. Her usual calm expression had softened. "You should rest," she said gently. Markel gave a weak smile. "I told you a hug would not stop me," he said. Nirel lowered her gaze, hiding a small smile. She did not know how to explain the storm of emotions inside her heart. All she knew was that something had changed forever inside that broken dome. The palace was quiet after the chaos. The broken glass garden stood under heavy repair, surrounded by guards and scientists. Engineers worked day and night to rebuild the structure, while officials investigated the sabotage. The news of the incident spread quickly across both civilizations. Everyone spoke about the strange and brave act of the human who had hugged the alien princess and survived. Markel rested in the medical chamber, surrounded by blinking monitors. The air smelled clean and cold. Doctors from both human and Lyran teams checked his condition again and again. They could not understand how his body had adapted to the princess's poison. His blood showed unique reactions, forming a natural resistance that had never been seen before. Nirel visited him every day. She could not enter the chamber fully, but a clear barrier allowed them to talk. She stood on one side wearing a soft silver gown, while he lay on the bed on the other side. Their conversations had changed. They no longer spoke through the translator system. They used a shared basic language that Nirel had learned through their talks. Her voice was gentle, and her eyes carried a warmth he had never seen in her before. "You scared many people," she said during one visit. Markel laughed softly. "I scare people often without meaning to," he replied. "But I would do it again if it meant keeping you safe." Her cheeks glowed faintly, a natural reaction of her species that showed emotion. She tried to hide it, but he noticed. Outside the chamber, leaders from both sides met to discuss what had happened. The sabotage attempt had shaken the trust between the two civilizations, but Markel's actions created a new wave of hope. The alien emperor ordered a full investigation, and several saboteurs were caught. They admitted they wanted to stop the treaty, but their plan had failed. Scientists became curious about the interaction between Markel and Nirel. They asked to study his blood and skin, and they also requested to examine Nirel's poison in detail. With her father's permission, Nirel agreed. She wanted answers too. The research revealed something extraordinary. Human biology could adapt quickly to certain alien toxins under strong emotional and physical responses. Markel's body had triggered this reaction because of his determination to protect Nirel. His resistance was not complete, but it was enough to survive contact. This discovery opened new possibilities for peaceful interaction between the two species. Weeks passed. The garden was rebuilt stronger than before. New security measures were added, and communication systems were improved. During this time, Markel recovered fully. He was invited to a special meeting with the Emperor and the human ambassador. The Emperor, a tall figure with calm eyes, looked at him with respect. "You risked your life for my daughter," the Emperor said. "Many would not have done what you did. Because of your actions, many of my people now see humans in a different light." Markel stood respectfully. "I did what I thought was right," he answered. "No one should be left behind, no matter who they are." The Emperor nodded slowly. "My daughter has lived her whole life behind glass. She was seen as dangerous even by her own people, but your actions have shown that danger can be understood, not feared. You have changed how we think." The human ambassador spoke next. "This moment will be remembered," he said. It will help both our worlds move toward true peace. A ceremony was held weeks later to celebrate the signing of the full treaty. Unlike the first attempt, this time the atmosphere was full of hope. The main hall was decorated with banners and lights. People from both sides stood side by side, not as strangers but as future partners. Princess Narelle appeared at the ceremony wearing a new protective suit, designed using the research from Markel's case. It allowed her to be near others without fear of harming them. It was not perfect, but it was the first step toward a normal life for her. When she entered the hall, people stepped aside respectfully, but this time their eyes were not filled with fear. They were filled with curiosity and admiration. Many had heard the story of how she was saved and how the human had survived her touch. Markel stood near the front with the human delegation. When their eyes met, they shared a quiet smile. It was the kind of smile that spoke of everything they had been through without needing words. During the ceremony, the Emperor invited Markel to stand beside his daughter as a symbol of the new bond between their species. The crowd watched as the two stood together on the platform. Their presence side by side was more powerful than any speech. After the treaty was signed, celebrations filled the palace. Music from both worlds played through the halls. Lights floated in the air like tiny stars. Narelle walked among guests for the first time in her life. Children stared at her glowing skin with wonder. Elders nodded in respect. She felt something she had never experienced before. She felt like she belonged. Markel joined her near the rebuilt glass garden later that evening. The dome shone softly under the twin moons. The air was quiet, and the plants inside were slowly returning to their natural beauty. "This place looks peaceful again," Markel said. Narelle touched the glass gently. "It feels different now," she replied. "Before it was my cage. Now it feels like part of a bigger world. I never thought that would happen." Markel looked at her with calm eyes. "You changed too," he said. "You opened the door for both our worlds." She smiled softly. "And you were the one who walked through it," she answered. They stood side by side, watching the soft light inside the garden. Neither spoke for a while. They did not need to. The silence was warm and full of meaning. In the weeks that followed, joint research teams began working on ways to help more humans adapt to the princess's toxin safely. Cultural programs were launched. Students from both sides exchanged knowledge. Trade and exploration agreements were signed. The story of Markel and Narelle spread far beyond the palace. People on both planets shared their story as a symbol of courage and connection. They became a living reminder that barriers, no matter how strong, could be broken through understanding and trust. Late one night, as the palace lights dimmed, Narelle walked through the quiet garden. She saw Markel waiting by the new glass wall. She placed her hand on the glass. He placed his hand on the other side, just like the first time they met. But this time, the wall between them did not feel like a barrier. It felt like a bridge.